Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock, so let's make a start. Welcome to today's planning meeting of the 16th of October. I would like to welcome members of the public and councillors and officers to this meeting, and I call upon the clerk who will advise how the meeting will now be run this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Please note that we are live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. The proceedings of the meeting will also be recorded. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and turn them off when finished. Please can attendees in person refrain from watching the live stream, as this will cause interference for our viewers. In accordance with the Constitution, members of the public who have registered to speak will be permitted to do so when invited by Madam Chairman. I have confirmed those entitled to speak. We are not expecting any fire alarm testing today. In the event of an evacuation, you will hear a recorded message requesting you to evacuate the building. Please leave by the nearest exit and the Riviera Centre staff will assist you. Once outside, please assemble in front of the tennis courts to the seaward side of the building. Please also ensure that your mobile phone and iPads are turned to silent. Each application will be dealt with in the following order. The planning officer will present the submitted application and will outline the proposed recommendation in full. Any speakers registered to speak on the application will be invited to address the committee, and this will be taken in the following order. Speakers against, neighbourhood forum representatives, any councillors who are not members of the committee, followed by speakers in support of the application. All speakers will have a maximum of 5 minutes each to address the meeting. This will be followed by questions from members and responses from the planning officer. Once questions from the committee have concluded, Madam Chairman will open the application for debate. At the conclusion of the debate, Madam Chairman will seek a proposer and seconder for the application. The proposals must be in full and include all information such as conditions or reasons. Madam Chairman will then confirm with the planning officer if they wish to enter into a period of summing up. Members, if at any point you leave the meeting for any reason during the consideration of an application, you will be unable to vote on that application. I will now hand the chairing of the meeting to Madam Chairman, Councillor Jackie Thomas.
Thank you. Clerk, are there any apologies or updates to the meeting of the committee?
Madam Chairman, I wish to report that Councillors Cowell and Councillor Pentley send their apologies. In addition, in accordance with the wishes of the Conservative group, Councillor Hutchings is substituting for Councillor Joyce, and in accordance with the wishes of the Liberal Democrat group, Councillor Verdi is substituting for Councillor Mandy Darling for this meeting only.
Okay, thank you, but we don't seem to have Councillor Vardy sat at the meeting. Okay, thank you. Minutes. To confirm as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of this committee held on the 18th of September 2023. Is there a proposer, please? Councillor Billings. And a seconder? Councillor Hutchins. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous, Chair. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Do any members of the Planning Committee have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest on any of the items on today's agenda? Please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Do any officers have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest on any of the items on today's agenda? Okay, thank you very much. Are there any urgent items?
Not as far as I'm aware, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, to consider recommendations for adoption of the local validation list, which has been updated to reflect changes in national and local requirements, together with significant changes to the format of the document. I will now ask Mr. Rob Palmer to introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Rob Palmer. I'm Principal Planning Officer, soon to be Principal Historical Environment Officer from Wednesday onwards. So you'll probably see me again a few times here. So this is the Torbay Local Validation List update. What is it? So the local validation list is essentially a document which outlines all the information that an applicant needs to submit to allow us to validate and fully assess a planning application. It's a requirement of the MPPF that's reviewed every 2 years. Now, the currently adopted version was reviewed last in 2018, so we are a little bit overdue of that 2-year period. And the 2018 version had very much a light touch review, whereas this time we've aimed to have a bit more of a significant update, and that's for the following reasons. We wanted to make the document shorter, easier to use, more accessible. We wanted to help applicants identify what information they need based on site constraints and the nature of the scheme purely than just the application type. We wanted to be consistent with other local authorities around Devon. Other local authorities around Devon and beyond throughout England have changed the format of their local validation lists. We wanted to make sure we went down the same avenue. All of this combined would be a benefit, we hope, for both applicants, agents, and us as decision makers. So looking at the existing local validation list, and by the power of technology, I'm going to bring it up and try and scroll through. This is the existing document. So you can see it is based on application type. And we have 104 pages in this document. And it's set out in a table like this. And I won't go all the way because it will take us a long time. But it is quite long. And if I could ask we go back to the presentation, please. So what have we done? We have reformatted the document. We've based it into themes rather than application type, and I will, in the next slide, show you the new document and run through what that means. That has allowed us to reduce by exactly half, from 108 to 54. And we've also introduced, and again I'll show you slightly later on a later slide, separate checklists for all different application types. And these checklists will be downloadable and hopefully makes it easier for applicants to use and to assess what they need for an application. And in tandem with that, we've looked at what new requirements we may need both from a local and a national level. And these are some of them listed here on the slide. The report pack outlines them all. Some of them are local, like the wildlife and geology trigger table, things that we've been asking for anyway, but this formalises it. Some are national, like the fire statement, so that relates to kind of tall buildings and the need to submit that in regards to fire safety. And some are also kind of big ticket national items as well, like the biodiversity net gain assessment, which will be coming out in January 2024. We've included for that within the new document as well. So without further ado, we're going to bring up the new document. So you can see here, I'm going to try and look at it and also kind of speak. It's quite tricky. On the contents page, it's broken down into themes. So instead of all the different application types, you've got all the different themes. So we've got everything from plan statements, from historic environment, down to ecology. And we're hoping that makes things easier for applicants to actually base what they're doing on the site constraint and the nature of the scheme rather than purely the type of application they're putting in. And if I scroll down, we then go into how it's laid out here. And you'll see that you've got information on the title of the document. That is number referenced, and that tallies up with our checklists. And then we've got why we've included it, further information, and all the links in here to various kind of websites to give you further information has all been updated. And this all goes all the way down. And this is now 54 pages, as I said, rather than the 108. And if we could go back to the presentation, please. And here is an example householder checklist. So you've got the reference numbers on the left-hand side, so you can easily reference where you want to go into the actual local list, the main document itself. And then this splits things up into what you definitely need to submit, what you may need to submit depending on the local nature of the scheme, and also gives you a chance to explain on the far side in that little box if you perhaps are borderline whether you need to submit something or not. It gives you a chance to explain that within the checklist. Now, that was received very well from our planning agents, because there are situations where they haven't submitted a piece of information. It gets to an officer to validate, and rightly so. They come back to them with an invalid letter saying you've missed out X, and the planning agent then has to respond to that and say, well, I didn't put it in because of Y. So this allows them to kind of preempt that, and hopefully will speed up the validation process for both applicants, agents, and us. The other thing to mention with these checklists is that they will be available online, also downloadable. You can print them off and fill them in by hand. We're going to ask people to submit them with your applications. So that means it's easier for us when they come in. We can immediately see what's been submitted. And also we're going to be working with the website team to make them a bit more accessible online. So you can fill them in online, and then we're looking at options where you can kind of hover over the reference number and click on it, and that will take you straight to the local list. And even an option where you could hover over it and then it will bring up the information from the local list as a little pop-up box within the checklist. Those are things we're going to experiment on doing just to try and improve that accessibility. So we did go out to consultation. We went out to internal consultation, and then we went out to external consultation afterwards. We did a 6-week period from mid-August towards the end of September. It was available online, and we used the same format that we would do when we consult on an SPD. So that covered statutory consultees, it covered social media channels, spatial planning news flashes, emails to the consultation database, neighbourhood forums, community groups, organisations, developers, planning agents, and also members of the public could go online and could respond if they wanted to. Also had hard copies available at the Torquay Town Hall and also Torbay libraries as well. Coupled that with a press release to make sure that all avenues were covered in regards to consultation. We had 11 responses. You may think that's not a lot. That the optimist in me tells me that means it was probably quite good, but also that each of those responses was actually really detailed and really worthwhile, and I think the vast majority of those resulted in changes to the document itself, and those responses, how we dealt with them, were provided within Appendix 3 of this report pack as well. And for clarity, the report pack includes 2 versions of the document. We've got a clean version as Appendix 1, and Appendix 2 shows the marked changes as well, just so it's super clear what changes were made from the pre-consultation draft and the post-consultation draft. So the officer recommendation, I just want to highlight this has actually changed from what was in the report pack. The recommendation now is that the local validation list, as set out in Appendix 1 to the submitted report, be endorsed by the Planning Committee, and that the Divisional Director for Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency implements the updated list for use in respect of planning applications received after the 1st of November 2023. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Committee members, I will now invite questions to the Planning Officer. Are there any members wishing to ask a question, please? Okay, if there are no questions, do I have a proposal on the basis of the revised recommendation outlined by the officer in his presentation? Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Officers, Mr. Palmer, Mr. Backwell, I'd commend you on the work that you've done on this validation checklist. I had the benefit, Madam Chair, of being in attendance at the Agents Forum last week, where it was discussed with architects and planning agents. It was extremely well received in the room. It was considered to be helpful and constructive, particularly the checklist towards the end of the document were considered to be useful both for our officers and also those making applications as a way of guiding them through. And so therefore I would recommend we approve this document in the form of the shown before us, and in accordance with the Office of Recommendation. I'd say this is really good work. It streamlines the process, and the fact that we've halved the amount of paperwork that an applicant's got to look through is very appropriate. So I would propose approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Do we have a... I'm so sorry, Councillor Fox?
That's all right. I was just also at the meeting, the Agents Forum, and I'd agree entirely with what Adam Billings has said. It was well received. There were obviously questions asked, which is the purpose of it, but the overall thrust was very positive, and a lot of work's been done, and so well done. And I'll second Councillor Billings.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fox. So you are seconding the proposal. Okay, that's great. Do we have any debate? No, so I think we'll go straight to the vote. So all those in favour, please show your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you. So that's moved. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Moving to item 6, to consider an application for Torbay Holiday Motel at Collaton St Mary. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak upon entry to the meeting. I will therefore ask Mr Scott Jones to introduce the application. Thank you, Mr Jones.
Thank you. Can you just bear with me for a second?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. So the next application returns to committee after being considered in July, and it's an outline application for the demolition and redevelopment of up to 30 dwellings with detailed access at the Torbay Motel site at Collaton St Mary. So just running through the previous presentation for members, this is the aerial view of the site. It's currently less well maintained than shown on screen. So the application site includes the 5 buildings on the right-hand side, a swimming pool that is now derelict, and includes access to Beachtown Park on the right-hand side, and an access to Beachtown Court Apartments on the left-hand side of the screen. Beachtown Park is a mobile home park of around 90 units, and Beachtown Apartments providing 22 relatively small apartments. So this provides some context on the site in terms of the topography, the high point being on the southwestern corner, on the bottom left of the side, where the land falls away. Each line roughly represents a 0.5 metre drop in levels. So it drops from east to west. And just running through some slides of the site, which you possibly all know. See the Totnes Road there in view, and very prominent within the local street scene. And that's a view back towards Beachtown Apartments in the background. And this slide shows the entrance to Beachtown Park mobile homes site. So just in terms of some development plan context, the site is within a future growth area as identified by the pink colouring. And there are some other sites within the area that have recently achieved consents for housing, including sites to the north of the Totnes Road, where there's consent for 73 dwellings. And just out of this slide to the east, 400 dwellings near to the Ocean BMW site. So in terms of the development plan, around 40 units is expected on the former Motel site through policy SPD3. The site is also identified for housing within the Painted Neighbourhood Plan, as identified by the yellow. And there's also a master plan that's adopted covering Collaton and Mary future growth area, including this site. So this is a purely indicative layout within the master plan that shows how the site could come forward and showing some key aspirations for the site, which includes a linking road diagonally through to the wider future growth area, and also some key outcomes in terms of reinforcing some green border treatment in terms of ecological constraints. The master plan also details about safeguarding a link through to the Beachtown Park. So the proposed layout is retained as per when members last saw it in July. So this is an indicative layout, as all matters are reserved except for access. So this shows how the scheme could be delivered for up to 30 dwellings in terms of its arrangement to Totnes Road, its linkage through the site, and delivery of some green infrastructure there towards the southern border. So in terms of the detailed element, this is also unchanged from when members resolved the scheme in July. So it shows some highway works and a designated right-hand turn into the site from the Totnes Road, and obviously some footpath linkages on either side of the entranceway. The access is supported by the Highway Authority as an acceptable solution for the amount of development coming forward for the site, and also that expected for the wider future growth area. So this is some further highway detail that's been assessed by the highway engineers in terms of visibility. So the access has been moved slightly eastwards to maximise the visibility in both directions, and it's approximately, I think, 19 metres to the east of the existing access into the site. So this is an indicative landscaping scheme that members previously saw as well. Shows a small play area towards the southern border of the site and some replacement boundary detail, which is tied to some positive ecological outcomes in terms of providing a dark corridor to the field system below, to the south. This also shows a green landscape frontage to the Totnes Road to provide a softening of development, and also in terms of improving the expected amenity outcomes for occupants of the dwellings fronting what is a busy arterial road. And moving on to some indicative layout types of showing some mixed materials, breaking down the form, see some render and stone and some cladding. So these details are reserved for future consideration, so purely indicative at this stage. So this is some artistic interpretations of how the site would look. So that's a view into the site from the Totnes Road, just showing the likely arrangement that the indicative layout would produce, and also the materials there, showing elements of stone and cladding and render breaking up the development. And this is another piece of information that members previously considered, responding to concerns about access and egress to Beachtown Park to the east. It just shows some swept path analysis that larger vehicles, waste and emergency vehicles could access and egress the site appropriately. So in terms of key considerations, these are all detailed within the previous report that members resolved approval to, and principally remain the same and are unchanged from your previous consideration. The application returns to committee, principally because of the resolution and the desire for 3 additional conditions to be attached to the consent, and the inability of officers to agree to all 3 of those. So the additional key issue is the sale of Beachtown Court apartments and the impact of this on the committee's previous decision to secure enhancements there. So just as a recap, this was a summary of the previous committee resolution. So it was approved subject to the additional conditions. So that included a tighter 2-year time period for the submission of reserved matters over the standard 3 years. Some greater emphasis on the setback distance and positive active frontage to Totnes Road being secured in accordance with the indicative plans. So those 2 conditions have been agreed with the applicant. The third condition, condition C, which was the requirement to incorporate and secure landscape and appearance enhancements to Beachtown Court and associated parking area to comply with the Collaton St Mary Master Plan, has not been agreed with the applicant due to a change in circumstances from at the time of the application being made. Principally, Beachtown Court was identified as land in control of the ownership and was outlined in blue within the application. Following the committee resolution, the applicants have advised that Beachtown Court was sold in the week prior to the committee, following its agreement to sale in May of this year. So obviously it took a period of time, but its formalisation was sold before the committee. In terms of the implications on the proposed committee, that means that Beachtown Court is no longer in control of the applicant, and hence a condition requiring improvement to that presents some concern in terms of delivering a scheme and meeting the tests for planning conditions. So just for members, obviously as detailed within the committee report, there are tests for planning conditions that must be met. These are known as the 6 tests, which are detailed on the slides. So in terms of conditions being used on land that is not in control of the applicant, which has obviously been the material change since members last considered the scheme. So this is advice on the National Planning Practice Guidance. So principally, it says that it may be possible to achieve outcomes through negatively worded conditions known as Grampian conditions, i.e. prohibiting development unless a specific action is taken. In this case, the enhancements to Beachtown Court and its approval. But it does cite that such conditions should not be used where there are no prospects at all of the action being in question being performed within the time limit. And also there are concerns, in terms of the how this meets the wider tests in terms of conditions being enforceable or reasonable. Obviously, in general, Grampian conditions on land adjacent are generally tied to, you would see, like highway improvement conditions, or for, as it was in this case, for land in control of the ownership, where there is the ability to agree for works to be undertaken, and also those works can then be enforced upon because they are in control. Once you have a situation where the land is in control of a third party with no connections, there are then issues of wider reasonableness as it presents a sort of a lock gate on a permission that the applicant no longer has control on. So the applicant has proposed a solution of a legal agreement with an obligation of £20,000 to be paid to the authority for the authority to deliver improvements within the gateway area in the public realm, or to deliver improvements to Beachtown Court should the authority reach agreement with the new owners. It is considered reasonable to deliver that through a legal agreement, and the revised officer recommendation to members is as per the report. So that's one of approval, subject to the conditions outlined, including the additional conditions A and B of the Planning Committee resolution made on the 24th of July 2023, with final drafting of the conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, and the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement to secure heads of terms in accordance with the adopted planning contributions and affordable housing supplementary planning document on terms acceptable to officers, and to include £20,000 financial obligation to secure improvements to Beachtown Court, or to secure public realm improvements to the wider Western Gateway area of the Collaton St Mary Master Plan area. And also the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. That concludes my presentation. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I will now call Mr. Michael Drake to address the meeting in support of the application. Mr. Drake, you have 5 minutes, and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. I only want to make two key points. Firstly, needless to say, following the thrust of the decision in July, we didn't want to find ourselves in this position. If we could deliver the improvements to Beachtown Court, then we would. We're happy to agree the 2 other planning conditions that members wanted to see. We can't deliver the improvements to Beachtown Court, as you just heard from officers, because the property is now sold. Very simply, the mortgage expired in May. It went to a property auction in April. Sale was agreed this subsequent month and eventually went through in July. We've tried to deliver an inclusive planning permission. Indeed, our original application, the site not only included Beachtown Court, but also land to the southeast to try and deliver the whole section of Spine Road through to the wider master plan area. Ultimately, that application stalled because of third-party land issues, and that's why we've had to make the new application that's before members today. So it's a little bit obviously frustrating to resubmit and always end up with a similar third-party land issue, although hopefully this one is a little bit more straightforward to resolve. I do understand the aspiration from committee, obviously aware of the Collaton St Mary Master Plan. I had the discussion here last time around, and we do understand that there's good reasoning behind the improvements that members wanted to see. That leads me on to my second point about practicality. We've taken a look at what we can do to try and deliver what members wanted. I think the first point I make on that is with regard to the future context of this site. The access will move quite a long way further to east in the current position. So although reserve matters are to be resolved, there is a lot of scope within that new permission to deliver the gateway that the master plan wants and members discussed last time around. Secondly, we've drawn the land that was sold had a very tight boundary to the flat, so we have retained flexibility within our planning permission to deliver those improvements. We've got new visibility displays, new pavement, new bus stop at the frontage. There will be development to the east of Beachtown Court. There will be development to the south of it as well. So as I say, there will be that new context for the site in the fullness of time. Notwithstanding that, we do appreciate we can't deliver specifically what committee wanted with regard to Beachtown Court. So we've tried to think about alternatives to that, and our solution, as you've just heard from officers, is a contribution. We see that working in a way that any normal grant funding would work. The applicant could draw down the funding once the works are agreed and pay for it that way. If that can't be, it can't be done, then we're happy to agree flexibility in the wording such that it could be spent in the wider master plan area and hopefully deliver the same objective. So in summary, we would do the request if we could. We can't. The property's sold. We're confident the future context will deliver the gateway that members want within the land that's still controlled by the planning permission. Notwithstanding that, we're also offering contribution direct improvements to Beachtown Court or to the wider area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. If you'd like to take your seat back in the public gallery. Thank you. Committee members, I will now invite questions to the planning officer. Please may I remind members, questions should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Are there any members wishing to ask a question? Councillor Billings.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, officers, for a very helpful report and presentation. I just wanted to understand a little bit more this element of reasonableness and how it might relate to conditions. If I understand it at the heart of it, the concern here is because the applicant doesn't own the site where we're talking about having some improvements done, whilst they could conceivably negotiate with the owner, that owner's in a position where, as currently drafted, they could block the implementation of the scheme. Is that the key point that's causing the issue about reasonableness, please?
Yes, principally, obviously, you're relying on the consent of a third party to implement a scheme and also to deliver it as well. So not only are there issues of reaching agreement in terms of enforcing on that when there is no control over that land from the applicant, obviously, unlike a Section 106, where it ties other third parties to works, simply a condition placed on this application to deliver, improvements to a building next door, I would say it presents issues of enforceability as well. Obviously, our legal support may add comment to that. So I'll say it's a matter of, yes, reasonableness in terms of relying on non-connected third party, but also the enforceability. If you do agree a scheme and it's not delivered, how do you enforce on that when they're not tied to a permission in any way?
And if I may, Madam Chair, sorry, I've got 3 questions I just want to develop. And then in the alternative that's been offered in relation to improvements in the wider master plan area, that's a proposal that at this stage doesn't exist. We don't know what they are, so we're expecting some further information to be drawn out at the detailed submission stage, reserve matters. Is that what's proposed in relation to that?
So the detailed reserve matters will obviously consider and hopefully deliver a positive outcome for the red line site, so the development itself. The proposal for an obligation is more open-ended in terms of a financial sum to deliver improvements within council-owned land within the gateway area, or if the council can reach agreement with the Beachtown Court to deliver improvements in that. So it doesn't fix it to Beachtown Court, it provides an alternative, and obviously the authority as landowner, and the highway authority included in that, there is the ability to deliver some improvements commensurate to mitigate the scheme, which is different to a sort of a private unknown third party being incumbent on an agreement with those rather than the authority itself.
I have some caution though, because if we were to simply follow the proposal in the recommendation, the onus on finding those works and putting those forwards, it becomes the responsibility of the local authority rather than the obligation of the developer, and rather than it being the developer's team that's thinking of something that can fit with their development and how that holistically works with other landowners that they're clearly talking to and working with. As proposed, the obligation falls back to us. Is that correct?
Yes, principally. I suppose it presents a solution to an imperfect situation. So it overcomes the concerns about trying to deliver a negotiated scheme between third parties and the effects that has on maybe delivering the scheme in total. And it presents a solution to that, which the solution is to be found, but it presents, it presents funding to find mitigation. But yeah, that is on the local authority.
And so just related to that, because I have some concerns that we're taking on board the responsibility of designing this scheme. My understanding is because this is a pre-commencement condition, it needs to be, it obviously presents some challenges for the applicant because they've got to do all this in advance. Would there be a way of structuring it so that, for example, the demolition got done and work could crack on whilst a scheme was worked up, but we delivered it before, say, the first houses were occupied? Could that work if we kept the obligation on the developer to do this rather than us as a local authority and did it that way? Would that be a structure that could work if we were minded to keep the responsibility with the developer, but perhaps sort of down the line, if it didn't work, having some sort of cash figure? Could that work as a structure?
Yes, so that obviously provides some flexibility in terms of helping the scheme progress. Obviously, members will have to consider the issues of that would still leave the condition incumbent on reaching agreement with a third party, which is goes back to the reasonableness and the enforceability issue. If members are happy with the conditions being suitable and meeting the 6th test, then certainly providing a more flexible triggers within any such wording, could be appropriate. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Any further questions? No further questions, so I think we'll open for debate. Who would like to start the debate, please? Councillor Billings.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So going back, ultimately, members, we're here because of a condition that I asked for when I made a previous proposal for approval of this application. Members will hopefully recall that there was some discussion around the table between Councillor Fox and myself about the reasonableness of this condition at the time. And I think through that debate we were able to assure ourselves that there was a benefit that was reasonable in relating to getting to an improvement to the retained buildings to the west of the site. I still think that's reasonable, but I understand the point that our officers have advised us on in relation to ultimately the site promoters in a difficult negotiation with the new owners of those blocks of accommodation, in terms of having a constructive discussion about getting these works done, because ultimately, as it's currently structured, this site can't come forward if those works don't happen, so therefore there's not an equality in terms of that negotiation. It could almost be used as a ransom. And in my eyes, I can therefore understand how, as currently structured, it's unreasonable, but that doesn't mean what I was originally advocating for, that we try to get these works undertaken. I still think that's an important objective. So I wondered whether members, there was a way of restructuring this to try to achieve that objective, an objective that we all thought was reasonable, but in a way that provided parity and equality in terms of the negotiation for the two parties. I do think that there's the opportunity, if there isn't an agreement between those two adjacent landowners, to commute the funding to other improvements in the wider master plan area. but I think that would be a less desirable objective than actually improving the 2 blocks of accommodation themselves. And I also think ultimately it should be the developer to come up with these, possibly not policies, but it should be for the developer to come up with these proposals, different P word, the proposals in terms of what should be done. I don't think that should be down to the local authority. I think the developer is presumably working with adjacent landowners. I think they know best. And then if that can't actually be worked through, in my eyes, it should be a sum for the local authority. And so that was what I thought. I thought we should ideally get the works done on the 2 blocks of accommodation adjacent. If that can't sensibly happen, then it should be a commuted sum. If that can't sensibly happen, rather, then there should be a commuted sum for works elsewhere in the local plan area. And if that can't work, then it should be then the money should simply go through to the local authority. And I wondered whether we could have a discussion around that as a concept, and I put that up for discussion, and then work out how that could be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Do we have any debate? Councillor Fox.
Yes, I agree with the principles that have been outlined by Councillor Billings. I suppose my concern is that there's still scope for quite a significant delay on implementing the scheme. And I feel that's a realistic concern. And my own view, I think, would be that we've been given quite a sensible, pragmatic, sort of halfway house solution on this. And unless we can get we can fix this in a better way, I think we should go along with the officer recommendation, which the developers are clearly in accordance with.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Officer Catterall, would you like to come in on this? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, I think that what Councillor Billings would be suggesting is an agreement which would require the developer to approach the owners of Beachtown Court within some sort of timescale in order to see whether some sort of agreement can be reached, or in the alternative to develop some sort of other scheme for improvement, and there would need to be that sort of scheme envisaged, and who knows whether they reach agreement with the owners of Beachtown Court. I think Councillor Fox is right that has to be compared with the certainty of delivery and within a timescale of under the officer's recommendations. I think those kinds of the alternatives.
Thank you. Do we have any further debate? Councillor Adam Billings, thank you.
So just developing that through, I recognise, members, we're at an outline application stage, and we clearly need reserved matters to be submitted. And there will be, even with the best will in the world, there will be a time period for our officers to consider that. And equally, we could attach all of this to a later stage, thinking back to the questions that I raised earlier. We could attach all of this to a later stage, for example, a scheme to be submitted, for example, pre-commencement excluding demolition. So that would allow works to happen to ensure no delay, and then that to be implemented prior to first occupation. So I think if we were minded, we could get something here where we could use the existing time process that's clearly happening. We want it to happen fast. That was the reason. One of the other conditions we put in place last time was reserved matters within 2 years. That was the reason I put it there. I want to see this happening fast. But equally, I think within the planning process, I think there's the opportunity to see whether there could be discussions between the site promoter here and the adjacent landowner, see how that went. And if that didn't succeed, the applicant the site promoter here could put forward a scheme of works within the wider master plan area. And if our officers weren't quite happy with that, then we could have a lump sum funded through to the council. And one of the reasons why I think that is I've got no information before me to show why £20,000 is the appropriate amount. And I personally didn't have in my mind at the previous committee when we spoke that actually the scope of the works that I was advocating, that we were agreeing at that time, cost £20,000. And that's why I think that it would be appropriate not to fix our fix the condition on a specific lump sum at this stage where we've got no breakdown as to how it's arrived at. If I was to choose a figure, I personally think the scope of the works that we were discussing previously, I would have thought would be more like £50,000 to 20. But in the absence of detailed information about why it's a particular figure, I'd rather focus on the practical works rather than a financial amount, but recognise with the correct structure there'd be an opportunity to agree an amount if works can't be done at a later date through that planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Any further debate?
I haven't got
Fox?
I haven't got a problem, Madam Chairman, with that that lining up of action to take place. I think that's fair comment. I'm just again concerned that it doesn't become an excuse for a lot of delay, because as a housing authority, a local planning authority, we are desperate for houses.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Billings?
Could I ask through you, Madam Chair, whether officers could see that sort of structure working, and whether we, for example, we had a negatively worded condition which required, which looked at as a staged process the scheme of landscaping works as we currently agreed at the last committee, or in the alternative, a scheme of public realm improvements in the wider master plan area, or in the alternative, the payment of a cash receipt to be agreed with the local authority at a later stage, with that being put forward pre-commencement excluding demolition, and then implemented prior to first occupation, whether officers could find that some sort of drafting around that achieved those objectives, and could they think that could be workable and not cause delay, please, through you, Madam Chair?
Thank you. Mr Jones, can you unpack a little bit of that? Thank you.
So I think that the the timing requires the submission of reserve matters within 2 years, and so that would provide some sort of timescale for discussion and negotiation.
Thank you. So you, Mr Jones, would you be in agreement with that? Are you happy with that?
Yeah, so it would probably need some finessing and some clear thought, but I would assume that you'd want some sort of a tiered process where you'd want a scheme for improvements to Beachtown Court and its surrounds, and if not, evidence of best endeavours that has been followed through, then a scheme for improvements in the wider area discussed with the local authority, then if not, a financial obligation to an agreed sum. But I think it needs some thought around the wording, because I think you need to have that best endeavours part to grow, so you ensure that it doesn't instantly go down the hierarchy. But yeah, there's possibly a wording that could work.
Thank you. Councillor Billings?
Subject to, I agree it would need that sort of finessing. I would suggest, I would query members whether that could be delegated to officers, but I think clearly we would want to understand that they're trying their best at stage 1 and stage 2 before we immediately jump to stage 3. But I think that could be set out by asking for best endeavours. But subject to that, that's the sort of thing that I'd be happy to recommend approval on when we get to that stage, Chair.
Thank you. Is that a proposal that you would like to recommend?
If there's no further debate, Madam Chair, that is a proposal I'd like to put forward. That with the variation of that one point of the officer's recommendation, to take that staged condition, I'd like to put that forward as approval, please. Yes. And for the benefit of the minute, I'm quite happy to lay that out a little bit more simply, if that's of benefit.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jones, would you like to pause for a couple of minutes whilst we gather the wording on that, or is that something that you are happy to go with? Thank you.
I'm not sure if this is working. Yeah, it may be possibly more robust to defer the detailed wording of the condition, because it's going to be maybe quite wordy and have various stages. So I would suggest that it's good to outline some key ambitions within a suggestion maybe, and have delegation to ensure that obviously there's clarity in terms of, you know, the hierarchy. You know, we obviously that's very clear in terms of securing that and how you secure that through conditions from the wording. But yeah, so I'd suggest some form of delegation would be possibly provide a more robust solution.
Thank you. I'm going to bring Mr. Cottrell in.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to be clear, it will require an agreement, because as I understand, the final fallback position would be a contribution, and so it would require a resolution to approve subject to an agreement.
Councillor Billings?
Just to be clear, Mr. Cattrall, I totally get the agreement. The figure would not have to be agreed at this stage, though. That could follow later, presumably. We don't, or this consent remains open. What I don't want to do is to have this all hung up about a discussion about whether it's £20,000 or £21,000. Would that be achievable, please?
Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Fox?
It's all fine, but I just want us to bear in mind that and quite rightly, we've brought forward the time period on this from down to 2 years. And I've got a bit of concern that we're going perhaps rowing in the opposite direction with some of this. And it's important that we bear in mind the urgency of the scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Billings?
So just to be clear then, Chair, my proposal would be approval, subject to the officer report, subject to the details of the officer report, with the exception in relation to the treatment of this aspect, where we would delegate to officers the ability to agree with the applicant through an agreement, a document that put in place a stage process, which was one, to try to seek the physical and landscape improvements to the adjacent dwellings that have now been sold immediately to the west as a preferential option. If, having followed best endeavours, that's not achievable, to put forward to the local planning authority a scheme of enhancements to the public realm in the wider master plan area for the approval of the local planning authority. And if that, in the eyes of the local planning authority, doesn't achieve an equal benefit, then the payment of a commuted sum. And I don't believe that should, in that stage process, I appreciate there are stages, but I don't see why, given the fact we need all of the other details, that should hold the process. So I therefore would put that forward for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Can I just put that back to the officer, whether he is happy with the wording? Thank you.
Yeah, I understand that concept. Simon, Mr. Cattrall, are you happy with that?
I would just question or add, Madam Chairman, that there was mention that the scheme be agreed prior to commencement except demolition, and that it be implemented prior to occupation.
Sorry, yes, I should have added that as well, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So if if the officers are happy with that proposal, can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Fox. Thank you. And is there any debate on the proposal and the seconder? Thank you. No debate. All right, thank you very much. So in that case, I think we will go to the vote. So all in favour of the proposal on the table? Thank you. And that's carried unanimous. Thank you very much. And that is approved with the new proposal. Thank you very much. I think we'll move straight on to item 7, if everyone is happy with that. Okay, so our next application is for Dawn Brim Hill, Maidencombe, Torquay. The clerk has confirmed those who have registered to speak upon entry to the meeting. I will therefore ask Mr. Sean Davis to introduce the application. You may want just a couple of minutes, as I've just put that on you. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is a variation of condition application. Variation of condition application for changes to Dawn Brim Hill that were upheld on appeal in 2020. So this is the site. I'm not sure if that's working. No. At Teignmouth Road, you can see in yellow at the top of the slide on the left-hand side. Is there a pointer on this? Brilliant. Okay, thank you. This is the site here, Dawn Brim Hill, and it's a bungalow dating from about the 1930s. Presents a single story from Brim Hill, but due to the sloping nature of the ground, it presents as 2 stories at the back. This is an extract from the policies map. So this is Teignmouth Road. The green shading is countryside area. The green dotted lines are the undeveloped coast. The red teeth show the Maidencombe conservation area. The site is here, so it's just outside of the conservation area. The orange teeth show sites of wildlife importance. The site is not in one of those. The blue dots at the bottom are flood zone free, and this blue line is the coastal change management area. This shows the Maidencombe village envelope. The site is here, so within the Maidencombe village envelope. This is an extract from the Maidencombe conservation area appraisal. The site's here, and again you can see that it's just outside of the conservation area boundary. This is a Grade 2 listed building. This is the courthouse, which is a Grade 2 listed building, and you can see there are others more in the centre of the village. The proposal is to regularise changes that have been made during the build, which is ongoing at the moment. The changes are all small in scale, and are being, this application is being made, as I say, to regularise the existing approval. So this is the layout plan that was approved in 2020. This is an extension on the side. This is the existing garage. The proposal here is to add 3 roof lights to the roof of the extension. They don't overlook anyone. I've been inside the extension, and you can't see them from Brim Hill. This is the front elevation facing facing Brim Hill. This was approved in 2020, and this is what's currently proposed, and this is what's currently been built. So the proposal here is to remove the chimney from the design and to lower the two previously approved gables at the front of the property by about 40 centimetres, and you can see what they look like. They've been built now in accordance with the proposal. This is the rear of the site. The way that these drawings are presented is a little counterintuitive, but if you see these openings here, so 1, 2, 3, 4 openings, those are these openings. And it's just, the drawing's been presented in this way, I think, just so that the architect could fit them all on the same page. So there's no significance to that. The change in the rear elevation is this approved bathroom window is proposed to be expanded to become floor to ceiling and wider. That's the only proposed change in this elevation. This is the aperture for the expanded bathroom window, and this is the view out of it. So it doesn't overlook any neighbours. This is a view of, or views of the property from Rockhouse Lane, which is below the site. This is from the entrance to the courthouse. You can see the building here, and this is from further along Rockhouse Lane, where the building's a bit more prominent. I've walked along Rockhouse Lane. I couldn't see the bathroom window that we've just been discussing. This is one of the side elevations of the property. So this was approved in 2020, and this is now proposed. So a change here is to introduce this lower ground floor obscure glazed bathroom window, and this is the aperture for it. Obviously it wouldn't overlook any neighbours, and you can't see this from Brim Hill. This is the other side of the building. This was approved in 2020. The proposal is to omit this window, basically. That's it. The other aspects of the proposal is the colour of stone cladding. So in 2020, we approved this colour, which was suggested by the applicant. My understanding is that the quarry where this was going to be sourced no longer supplies stone cladding. The applicants had to source that from another quarry, and it's more of a blue colour. These are the policies that we think are relevant. There's a number of policies raised by objectors that we don't think are strictly relevant here, and those are in blue. The starting point for the assessment of this is what was approved in 2020. We think that the proposed changes are minor. We don't think that they would impact negatively on visual impact or heritage, countryside coast, the Maidencombe, character of Maidencombe itself, neighbour amenity or flood risk. So the recommendation is for, subject to the condition in the report, approval with final drafting of conditions delegated to Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency. That's...
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I have had a number of requests to speak on this application, and I have exercised my chairman's discretion to allow additional speakers, therefore permitting additional time for speakers both in support and against. I call Mr. Carl Taylor to address the meeting against the application. Mr. Taylor, you have 5 minutes, and the clerk will let you know when you have just 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, my name is Carl Taylor, and I'm a resident of Maidencombe. The case officer's report, unfortunately, is fundamentally flawed. It's also misleading. This is clearly indicated in the choice of language in the report, where the officer speaks of a number of departures that have taken place. This is a clear attempt to deflect from what are more accurately described as breaches of consent, and they are quite significant. 2 separate investigations concerning this development were undertaken this year by the local government ombudsman. The ombudsman found that officers were at fault and had failed in their duty to engage with residents concerning their complaints and failed to communicate with residents regarding reported breaches. Officers admitted to the ombudsman that there were breaches of consent and confirmed that they had not taken enforcement action due to lack of staff and more pressing priorities. Members should note that the case officer's statement on page 183 says, quote, "The current application under consideration here seeks to regularise these breaches. The issue of whether or not enforcement action might have been taken in the past is not relevant." The case officer is wrong. The issue is highly relevant. The Council cannot grant approval simply because officers fail to take control over this development. The Torquay Neighbourhood Forum highlighted this very succinctly. It is unacceptable for the applicant to achieve authorisation of non-compliance with these conditions, which are imposed by the appeal inspector, by requesting a variation of those conditions. Members should also note that the case officer, in his report before you, states that officers refused the application for non-material amendment solely on the basis that it did not meet the technical rules that need to be met. This is a complete contradiction to what the case officer stated in his decision for the refusal of the non-material amendment, and that should be noted, please. So what are the breaches of consent? They've been well documented in various submissions. The depth of the veranda along the southeast elevation extends further into the garden than the original balcony. Photographic evidence can confirm this. The design of the terrace or decking and the area beneath it along the southeast elevation do not conform to the approved plans. The excavations beneath the terrace decking are not shown on the plans. The lower level windows facing the neighbouring property Brim have been installed with plain glass, contrary to the planning condition. The builders have elected not to rebuild the former gable roof eaves higher. Consequently, the shape and height of the roof do not comply with the approved plans. The height of the roof has been one of the most contentious parts of this development. Despite formal requests, there's been no response from Council whether the measurements have ever been verified, whether the original roof height has been verified, and whether the increase is indeed as proposed. As a consequence of the refusal of the non-material amendment, the following now constitute further breaches of consent. Lower ground floor window in the bathroom at the rear, utilisation of the undercroft and the formation of a window into this space, window alterations to the existing porch, the chimney stack shown on the approved drawings omitted, additional roof windows to the side extension. A good example of the chicanery that is taking place is the terrace or decking at lower ground floor level. The appeal inspector for the Certificate of Lawfulness, I draw your attention to this image. The appeal inspector for the Certificate of Lawfulness pointed out that the replacement decking had been built to a completely different design and with different materials than approved. There had also been substantial excavations beneath the decking which were not in the approved plans. This image is from the approved plans and simply says at the bottom, marked in red, replacement deck area, the ground appears to be at level ground. This next image shows the architect's version of the property prior to development. The terrace is shown as a wooden decking with earth beneath it, and the terrace, the level terrace is on a sloping ground. The next image shows the terrace from the approved plans with the same structure. It is a replacement decking with the same sloping ground beneath, 1 for 1. This is what has actually been built. It is nothing like in the approved plans, and this is what the inspector picked up and mentioned. There is a further glaring inaccuracy in the case officer's report. The officer concedes that this terrace does not comply with the approved plans, but he believes it's acceptable because the current proposals do not involve any increase in the impermeable area of the site. This is absurd. The terrace has a solid decking and base. It adds to the impermeable area. The enforcement officer states that the decking has a depth of 4 metres and it extends the length of the dwelling. This increases the impermeable area from 80 square metres to well over 110 to 120 square metres. This is
Thank you,
unprofessional.
Mr. Taylor. Your 5 minutes
Thank you.
are up. If you'd like to take your place back in the public gallery. Thank you.
Should I finish?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've got 1 minute or finished? Sorry?
Your 5 minutes are finished.
Okay.
You were told when 1 minute was remaining. Thank you. Thank you. My next speaker, I now call Ms. Linda McCormick of the Maidencombe Residents Association to address the meeting against the application. You have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you just have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Oh, sorry. Officers say that they're satisfied that the current drainage proposals do not involve any increase in the impermeable area of the site. The case officer also maintains there is no off-site and downstream drainage implications associated with the current proposals. This is false. Maidencombe lies within the Torbay critical drainage area with no public mains drainage system in the village. Therefore, both foul and surface water drainage is all by sustainable drainage systems. At no time has the drainage design for foul waste been submitted, reviewed or approved by Torbay Council. Given the change from a small 1-bathroom bungalow to a 5-bed, 5-bathroom property, the volume of domestic sewage will significantly increase. Since 2015, the increase in flow from new development requires that a new approved treatment plant and drainage field must be installed and a new discharge permit granted by the Environment Agency. Failure to follow this regulation would render operation of the foul waste system illegal. The revised building layout indicates foul wastewater being discharged on the southwest side of the property, but there are no drainage design details of how discharge will flow to septic tanks. It would be illegal to discharge it to a soakaway. The MPPF states that drainage from any development must not cause flooding at the site or increase flood risk elsewhere. The design of SUDS drainage systems is covered by various national standards and EA regulations. Torbay Council has included these requirements into their own SUDS manual, which apply to this development. The Council's drainage engineer stated in 2020 that the drainage design must not result in an increase of flooding or to downstream property and land, and warned officers that there would be a risk of water re-emerging. Given the significant increase in the impermeable area and steep gradients of the site and beyond, an attenuation tank is required to regulate the discharge off-site. On the drainage scheme, a tank is shown at eastern boundary, but there are no design details, and the exceedance discharge is stated as a pipe under the fence directed at the Grade 2 listed courthouse and other properties. The ground at and below Dawn slopes away at a gradient of 34%, far in excess of the 10% recommended maximum for SUDS, and therefore water emergence downstream is likely to be directly into a flood risk zone 3 area. Officers and David Edmondson were shown evidence of drainage flow re-emerging in the driveway at the Grade 2 listed property, and tests by South West Water proved that the discharge was most likely from Dawn, but this was ignored. The drainage concerns were also raised with the Ombudsman. The Council's only defence is that, based on their professional judgment, the revised drainage was considered compliant and properly approved. Consequently, Condition 7 was discharged. A professional judgment requires that all relevant drainage calculations are carefully assessed. Despite requests for details of the design information that were submitted to the Ombudsman by the officers, they have not been forthcoming. The Torbay Council Manual clearly states that a list of design information should be supplied with a planning application, yet it was not. Following the successful appeal, the applicant submitted a surface water design. Importantly, this was refused by the council drainage engineer in February 2022. However, in November 2022, an identical drainage design was mysteriously approved. Officers maintain that they held discussions with the applicant's design consultant who provided the necessary information, but this information is not on the portal.
1 minute remaining.
The planning application before you today does not specifically include condition 7 because the council and the applicant have deemed it already approved. But the stage 2 formal compliance on this issue has not been properly satisfied, and despite the council's stated desire to see Dawn finished and off their table, simply adds to the long list of the council's failures to properly scrutinise the submissions and take enforcement action. A resident of Maidencombe is a chartered civil engineer with over 40 years water industry infrastructure design experience at director level, and he has an obligation to his professional institution to challenge any situation where design or construction is considered to be not compliant with national standards, design guidelines or UK regulations. And this situation applies to the drainage at Dawn. So unless David Edmondson, who signed off condition 7, can produce a copy of a fully compliant drainage event design, then regrettably the matter will have to be reported.
Your 5 minutes are at an end. If you'd like to take your seat back in the public gallery. Thank you very much. I now call Miss Julie Brandon on behalf of Torquay Neighbourhood Forum to address the meeting against the application. Ms Brandon, you have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you just have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. Before I read the statement out, just for clarity, I believe that the application in 2020 was refused by Torbay Council's Planning Committee. It wasn't approved, it was refused, wasn't it? It went to appeal. So this statement has been agreed by the steering group of the Torquay Neighbourhood Plan Forum. This application is the culmination of an ongoing saga of refusal, appeal and lack of enforcement. The applicant is now trying to regularise his departure from permitted plans. If you approve this application, you'll be setting a precedent that gives the green light to developers to build whatever they want and hope to get a retrospective consent. The primary issues associated with the application are the scale and height of the building, misleading drawings and drainage. The community and the planning committee did not support the expansion of the building under application P 2020-1044, but this was allowed at appeal. This new amendment seeks to expand the building even further, both in footprint and in height. New impermeable surfaces have been introduced that will impact the volume of rainwater runoff. To be consistent with your previous decision, you should refuse this application. The case officer has stated that the non-material amendment was refused because the changes were not trivial. In fact, the officer's report for that states that officers cannot have any insight into whether the changes to the approved plans proposed would also have been supported by the planning inspector. Furthermore, the proposed variations were contrary to the objections received for P 2020-1044, and these objections remain for this new application. Other speakers today have highlighted the issues with the overall design scale and amenity. The forum has major concerns about drainage. There is no mains drainage in Maidencombe, so both rainwater and foul drainage must be properly addressed. There is no reference to foul drainage for which demand will increase with the greater number of bathrooms. It's a legal requirement since 2015 from the Environment Agency for the LPA to review and approve a detailed design of the septic tank and its drainage field. Contrary to the officer's report, there is a significant increase in impermeable area compared with that approved in P 2020-1044. The lower terrace and decking increase the impermeable area by 20 square metres to over 100 square metres. The discharge of P 2020-1044 Condition 7 relating to drainage design was refused in February 2022. It was subsequently approved in November 2022 based on the same scheme and identical documents, which are silent on foul drainage, inadequately address the new climate change extremes, and have insufficient information for the council to give proper professional judgment. The forum is concerned about the apparent failure in the council's professional duty by discharging Condition 7. The land below Dawn is a flood risk zone 3 area, so drainage is an essential consideration. Since development started, there has been significant emergence of water into Rockhouse Lane at the bottom of the hill below Dawn. Interestingly, Dawn has been unoccupied and there has been no building activity for a few weeks, and there has been no emergence of water, confirming a potential issue with foul drainage. The Forum asks that you refuse this application. You will not be acting unreasonably, so there is a minimal risk of an adverse cost decision if this goes to appeal. Thank you for your attention today.
Thank you, Ms Brandon. If you'd like to take your seat back in the public gallery. I now call Mr Tony Payne to address the meeting in support of the application. Mr Payne, you have 10 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you just have 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this afternoon. The application we made follows approvals granted in 2016 and 2020 for the extension of our home. All we want is the right to alter our home to suit our needs as we grow older, spending more time in the home rather than at work, which is the case at the moment. However, we do respect the rights of objectors to voice their opinion, but we have been subjected to a litany of complaints since the extension plans were approved in 2016, which have been directly resulted in the subsequent applications we have been forced to make. We have had regular visits from your enforcement officers in response to complaints by neighbours, and at the present time none of these complaints have been considered valid by Torbay's enforcement team. These complaints have included the height of the building being too tall, the extension being too close to the boundary, and the extensions being too deep and too wide. We have been accused of adding a 5th bedroom and planning an additional level under the patio. In each and every case, these complaints have been proved false. The current application is sought to reconcile a few minor changes we want to make, which have become apparent during the building works, which relates to the approval of in 2020. However, we feel the alterations are advantageous to our enjoyment of the building and will affect no one else. Briefly, the changes comprise of 2 new roof windows, skylights, 1 window in a bathroom, and the removal of a chimney stack which wasn't present in the original building in any case, and the alteration to the type of stone used on the facades. In addition, we have omitted 2 windows that were approved in the original application. These changes are required for very, very simple reasons. The flat roof window affects no one's privacy, but offers enhanced daylight to the interior, reducing the need for artificial lights being used during daylight hours, as this side of the dwelling faces north. In addition, there are several large trees on neighbouring properties which also reduce the amount of light in that aspect of the dwelling. The new bathroom window adds light to the interior of a very small room, but the glazing is obscured and therefore removes any possible privacy conflicts. The chimney stack is not needed due to the house being air sealed to meet low carbon energy targets, as we see no sense in building something which lets warm air out, and in no doubt in the near future home fires will become obsolete in the UK as it strives to meet net zero. So every little helps. The change of the stone specified is in response to the fact that the original stonework we selected is no longer being harvested at the quarry. Furthermore, we have submitted a letter to the planning department from the quarry in question backing up this statement.
Therefore, rather than using cheaper cladding, the substitute stone is of good quality and will retain the original design ethos of the original planning permission. We hope you will consider these points in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Would you like to take your seat back in the public gallery? Committee members, I will now invite questions to the planning officer. Please may I remind members' questions should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Are there any members wishing to ask a question, please? Councillor Maddison.
Yes, I'm interested in knowing how many questions were raised by residents in the area which did not receive a response, and whether you keep a record of those?
So we've got 10 objections which were recorded in the report. We had a request from objectors that we meet with them, and I asked for views about that internally, and the advice that I received was that it wouldn't be appropriate to do that. So we've got a record of that, but I'm not aware of anything else.
Sorry, you're not aware of written requests for information? I think that was referred to.
Some requests, well, there might be within the Ombudsman complaint, but I don't know.
I'm terribly sorry. I cannot allow any calling out from the public gallery. Please let the councillors do their job. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Maddison, did that answer your question? Thank you. Councillor Hutchins, I believe you have a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Is there any soakaway test data, the foul drain design, septic tank capacity, and it says something about the impermeable surfaces, land drains off the impermeable surfaces, anything? Is there any data for that, please?
Not within the context of this application. This application, as far as we are aware, as far as I'm aware, doesn't increase the impermeable area of the property that's already been approved. So there would be no reason to ask for any information like that on soakaways. I've not asked for any information about foul drainage. What you heard is correct. There is no sort of combined sewer in Maidencombe. So my understanding is that all of the properties have septic tanks, basically, and periodically they get emptied.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? All right. Thank you very much. I think Councillor Fox had his hand up first, and then I'll go to Councillor Maddison. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I've got two questions, if I may. The first one, referring to the split decision following the appeal, which is summarised on page 185 in the report. I just wonder whether it's possible that the officers could briefly summarise the elements that the inspector found acceptable and the ones that he or she found unacceptable. That's my first question. And my second one was, in the officer's report or in the presentation of the report, the officer referred to several minor changes. I just wonder whether there was a kind of cumulative significant impact. If you added all those together, would the answer still be the same from the officers, that it was minor rather than major? Thank you.
On the split decision point, I think you're talking about an application for permitted development that the applicant made, I think last year, I think, and we refused that on the basis that we didn't agree that what the applicant was proposing met permitted development rules. The inspector reviewed it, agreed that some parts of the proposal weren't permitted development, but disagreed with us and thought that others would be. I can't tell you which those are without looking it up, but they're not they're not related to this current application. I think at the time the applicant made that application to demonstrate to us that he could actually build something bigger under permitted development rules than he had approval for. But it's not. There's no connection with this current case. On the cumulative point, I would say not. The proposals here, in visual terms, probably the most sort of prominent would be omitting the chimney and changing the colour of the stone cladding. It's difficult to sort of be, I mean, I can't really, I'm sort of talking in hypothetical terms, but my feeling is we would have approved the colour of the stone cladding had it been applied for, well, we would have recommended approval for it in 2020. It's not, there's no reference in the officer report for that one, or the inspector's decision upholding the appeal that mentions the colour of the cladding. The chimney, there was no chimney at the property. The applicant wanted a chimney initially to sort of serve like a wood burner, but as you heard, it's now going to be heated with air heat pumps, and so there's no need for a chimney. I mean, the other changes are very small. You can't really see much of anything from the public domain, and I don't think that they have that cumulative effect.
Thank you. Councillor Fox, did you have any follow-ups, or are you happy?
I think the only problem I've got, thank you for your responses, is that if something's not related to this, why is it in the report? I suppose that's my question on that. And I suppose you're going to say for the sake of completeness. But that would be my question, that if you're putting information in that I'm not to take account of, that it shouldn't actually be in the report.
Yep.
I think you're quite right in terms of completeness. So just taking a step back, the complexity, the history, the planning history on this site, the evolution of the building on site, and the application process. I think for completeness, Ms Davis has shown a clear pathway towards a decision here. And just to be completely clear, the focus here of this decision is around those refinements. So obscure glazed window, omitting a window, omitting a chimney, changing the stone to the roof lights, and those two gable features at the front. That's the thrust of this application. That's what you're here to determine. So there's an important that's tracked as part of that as part of that report. But there's a sequence of events that we've been quite clear on and being inclusive in the report that Mr. Davis has provided. But as I say, that's the decision that's before you.
Thank you for the clarity. Councillor Maddison.
Yes, I mean, this is a very complex set of information to go through, and I think a little bit what worries me is to hear from members of the public. This is a public committee, and you can't help thinking that the non-response or the sort of failure to satisfy is a contributory factor in the complexity, if nothing else. The issue of foul drainage is one which I'm left, because of this lack of satisfaction of information, thinking is potentially an ongoing issue. So I'm wondering whether you can have a little look at that and satisfy us that it has been adequately dealt with. I think the other thing I want to mention is that, I mean, at what point is enforcement something which you would be expected if you have repeated breaches of of planning regulations. Is this not something which, for the sake, again, of public confidence, should be dealt with? So that's a number of different things that sort of leave me a little bit uncertain. Thank you.
So in terms of that parallel process, you've seen the planning history, the sequence of applications that come in, the different range of planning mechanisms, so non-material amendment, Section 73, and looking through to getting a scheme that's fully resolved. So you can see that pathway. Twin to that is the enforcement process that has been going on, enforcement investigations, who has met the building owner, and the fact that the enforcement team has been involved is why you start to see, I think it's correct, Mr Davis, that the NMA, Section 73, is a result of enforcement action to trigger those applications to regularise the situation. So you're seeing the result of enforcement investigation and advice from the planning team to get to that resolution. But again, you know, you're looking here at those principal changes to the elevations rather than the issues to do with flooding, which have been dealt with, I think, quite clearly in the report. Shouldn't undermine the decision that you're here today to make.
I believe Mr Cashel would like to come in on this.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman. I mean, it may assist members to give some thought to what, for example, any reasons for refusal might be. So, for example, you know, a change in the windows, that refusal on the basis of impact on drainage clearly is not sustainable, really. So I think members need to kind of focus on those sorts of issues, and really the issues are the changes. In relation to enforcement, if, for example, an easy issue might be the gables that we saw that have been moved a few centimetres. The issue for the committee is whether that is acceptable, not really whether that has been carried out in breach of the current plans, approved plans. I think the development is still under construction.
Yes.
The development is still under construction, so there's kind of a tricky legal issue there as to whether there is any breach until such time as the development is completed. But I don't want to introduce that complexity here. The issue in relation, the easy example is the gables issue is whether that is acceptable, the changes are acceptable, not really whether they've been done in breach of the plans.
Thank you. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, officers. I'm conscious, Councillor Thomas, that we're in questions. I've got quite a few things to say when we're in debate. But in relation to questions, just pin down exactly what we are granting consent for today. So I tried to answer that question to myself in two different ways. I looked at what the officer report said, and I also looked back onto the application form. And I just wonder if officers could assist me a little bit. The application form is a little bit more open in terms of its language used. Correct me if I'm wrong. It says extensions and renovations to the existing house and garage at Dawn at Brim Hill. So a rather open description. And then within the officer report, we've got on page 180, we've got a very clear numbered set of points in terms of what we're granting approval for. How have officers arrived at that list, and how do we know that that's exhaustive, please?
The applicant has written to us and set out what the application includes. I've spoken to the agent so that I'm clear on that, and I've compared the plans, the ones that are already approved and the new ones that we have. So that's how.
What?
Sorry. Thanks. So the description of development there is picking up on the original 2020 permission, repeating it, and then at the end saying that it's then setting up what those changes are. So the changes for fenestration and the conditions which relate to the approved plans, materials, and it sets out those various sorts. So that's only the first part that you mentioned there. So that's just a repeat for completeness and transparency. It's a repeat of the change of that appeal decision application from 2020.
I'm just conscious that quite a few of the concerns we had expressed earlier related to matters that are outside of that list. And so from the perspective of visibility for the wider community, how could the local community identify that it was those things and only those things that were changing from the planning portal, please?
I think probably the easiest way would be the letter from the applicant that I mentioned before, from the applicant's agent, which sets out those changes. And just a comparison of the plans, which is the same for every application.
Getting an approved set of plans which are accurate and measured. That's the result.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Are there any further questions? Councillor Tolshard, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was just a little bit concerned about the points that were raised about the extent of the decking and the terracing, which sounded as though they were quite a lot larger than were originally approved. Can you just clarify what has happened there, please?
I've asked the agent directly, is there any increase in footprint? And he said no. I've checked the plans. I can't see any increase in footprint. This is the approved layout. This is the proposed layout. They're the same. It's just the roof lights that change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fox.
Just picking up on Councillor Tolshard's point, which is basically going back to the accuracy of the plans. We did hear some quite significant difference in the impermeable area from one of the speakers a few moments ago, more than a few moments ago. I just wonder what your reaction to that is. Are you absolutely confident that there's no material difference in the extent of the square footage, square meterage?
Yes.
Talking about?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Thank you, Councillor Billings.
Could you help me understand that conclusion, please? I believe one of the slides that I saw earlier was a picture purporting to be of the decking. It appeared to me that, and I may have been mistaken, but it appeared to me that they were concrete beams with blocks laid indicative of a beam and block floor arrangement. Now, it may be the case that some timber or some composite deckings being constructed on top of that. That's perhaps not what I might have necessarily have understood if someone had just described decking to me. But if that is the construction, I understood the photograph correctly, would we be considering that permeable, please?
So I think you are correct in the construction. I've seen it myself, and it's concrete beams that seem to be slotted into a metal frame. The decking that we're talking about was approved in 2020 on appeal, so it already has approval. These proposals are not for that. If it turns, if there was another if it transpired that the decking had not been constructed in accordance with the 2020 plans, then that would be something for enforcement to consider again. But I'm not aware of that.
Thank you. I think Mr. Blackwell would like to add something there. Thank you.
I think it was less around the deck itself, the terrace. It was more around the changes of level beneath it, and that was the critical issue, and that's for our enforcement team to decide whether it's expedient to take action or not. But again, that's not part of this application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions for the officers, please? Thank you. In that case, we will move into debate. Is there who'd like to start the debate, please? Councillor Billings.
I think the first thing I was observed, Madam Chair, it's something we've seen at a previous application, also in Torquay, reasonably recently. I'd first want to express how sad it is that there seems to be between neighbours a lot of dispute arising from these proposed works, and that's hopefully something that over time they can move on from, because ultimately you've got to get on well with your neighbours. It makes your life living there much nicer. So I hope in time that happens. Leaving that as an aside, in relation to the list of points that we see on page 180 of the officer report, from my own perspective, I didn't see many issues personally, and I appreciate that that's leaving an aside a list of issues that I've heard raised by speakers earlier, and it's not that I don't give weight to what they say, it's just that those points that were being raised by the speakers don't appear in the list of things that we're actually granting consent for now. If that list, and that was related to my question earlier, is that if that list of things that this committee is considering as appearing on page 180 is exhaustive, then the concerns that the community were articulating in relation to this are not matters that we can really look at, because whilst I do understand the concern about is the surface water drainage sufficient, has there been infiltration testing, kind of 35-degree slope cope with extra runoff, it has the capacity of the the capacity of the septic tank and the sizing of the drainage field thereafter been sufficiently sized for the number of bedrooms. Those are not things that are in this list on page 180 of the report. And so from my perspective, whilst I do understand the concerns, I don't think this planning application is the best way of dealing with those. I think my own view would be those are things that our enforcement officers have to look through, and that has to go through due process. It's not because I don't consider those points validly made, and I've got a lot of time if members of the community are saying they don't feel that as a council we've looked at that properly previously, but I don't see how we can do that through this planning application, and that would be my starting point. I'd be interested to see what other members thought. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Anybody like to reply to that, or any further debate? Councillor Fox.
I mean, I have to agree with Councillor Billings on this, that you've really got to answer the questions on the exam paper, if you like. And the enforcement is the way through for these other points. And if you look at the list which starts off on page 186, where there are 8 criteria set out, then I think the report in relation to those 8 criteria feels to me as if there is no significant harm being done. I did ask the question about whether there was cumulative harm, and the answer I got was that even looking at them all together, it still isn't cumulative, and that we have, for example, under heritage, neutral impact. It's in a location that's close to a number of important environmental aspects, but that none of them are sufficiently strong or close to actually have an impact that's unacceptable. Obviously, heritage assets are very important for many reasons. I also was looking very carefully at the amenity, because amenity is a devil of a job to get right, particularly in relations to neighbours, as Adam Billings has said. And as an inspector, a former inspector, I've found that aspect of my work one of the most difficult. Sometimes the smallest schemes are the most difficult to resolve, as opposed to large schemes of several hundred houses. Often it's just 2 dwellings together. But I've looked carefully, I've read carefully and reread what the officers have said. And whilst there are issues, no doubt, it seems to me that the amenity aspect, relations to neighbours, is not unduly problematical, I would say, from that. We've also had the photographs put up. views out of various windows that we've been talking about. In relation to the chimney, again, I think we've heard strong arguments as to why the chimney is no longer needed, and whilst it wasn't on the original drawings. So I can see that changes are going to leave residents with a different situation than now. Looking at the list of the 8 criteria set out, I don't disagree with that list of 8 criteria. I think they are the right ones. But secondly, I think on each one of those, there are valid reasons given to go for approval. That's my own view.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Any further debate? Councillor Maddison.
I guess the planning officers and then later Councillor Fox and Councillor Billings have also added their comments on the criteria which we're judging tonight. But I would say that it may be the case, it's sort of my feeling that better communication at an earlier stage would help in this process as well, so that we, those involved who are tangentially or who are neighbours, can have confidence again in what's going on, that it's been properly supervised and that everything is in order. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maddison. Councillor Billings.
I suppose I should add, members, this is not something for this committee to consider in relation to this development, but I should add, sort of, if the photographs that we saw earlier, members, showed a permeable timber decking structure, that's not what the photographs that I've seen weren't. That's not how I would have anticipated it probably would have been constructed with some of the things there. So I think, sort of just developing that, I think perhaps there's a separate component of work for the local authority to do some follow-ups with this. But I would really stress, I don't think they're things for now. I personally would be considering the items that we are considering only. I would be happy to put forward a proposal for approval, but that's not to say that I think it's that there isn't that we shouldn't be prudent and address some of the points that the objectors have made through a different process outside of this application.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. So, are you happy to put approval in front of us today?
I am, Madam Chair. So approval as per the officer report.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Fox, you're happy to second? Do we have any debate on the proposal? Thank you. In that case, I will go straight to the vote. So all in favour of the proposal? Sorry. Against? Abstain? Councillor Hutchins, thank you. In that case, this application is approved. Thank you very much. So that concludes the committee today. So thank you for attending this planning committee. The meeting is now closed. I look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting and wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you.